Hello, everybody. It's Lydia again. I would just like to shortly introduce our strategic planning expert in internationalization in vocational education and training. That's Mr. Mika Saarinen. He's really great expert, and I think that this presentation would be very useful for you. He'll be joining us with the picture too, as you can see. So I'm really glad that we can have him here, and I hope that you'll enjoy his great presentation, that you'll learn something and enjoy his great sense of humor also. So Mr. Saarinen, go ahead and thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. That was nice words. Hi, everyone. As you can see, I'll be sharing my camera as well. I hope that at least gives you an idea of who it is at the other end who is speaking. Yeah. So my name is Mika Saarinen, and I come from the Finnish National Agency, and so we're colleagues, of course, with the Croatian agencies, Lydia and the rest there. And I'm very glad to be participating in your seminar. It's nice. I tried to listen in on the first part. I couldn't, of course, understand so much, but I still noticed I picked up quite a bit of what you were talking about, even if the language is foreign to me. So the issues are very common, of course, in all of our European countries, and we've all been working on these issues for some years now. In Finland, we've actually have a background of about 10 years even of strategic planning for internationalization on a bigger scale. And so we've been doing training events like these for the past 10 years, I would say, and we've also produced some material to support the organizations. So I'll be sharing some of those experience with you here, and I think some of you might have seen our guides and so forth, which are also part of the material for accreditation or charter applications. So if you have any questions, you can ask the questions maybe in the chat. That's the easiest, because then we don't need to open up microphone contact, and so just write your questions in there, and I'll try to answer them as we go along. Maybe not right away, but quite soon. And if there's somebody who has problems hearing or something, then also write that in the chat. But otherwise, I guess we'll go on and have a look at what the topics are for today. I would like to raise, of course, the question first maybe of why strategic planning at all? Because many people, I think, are thinking of this, that why make it so complex? I mean, we have our mobility projects, you know, we have our funding needs for the year, so why do we need to do any strategic planning, and why is the Commission and why are the EU programs asking for internationalization strategies? And what does this really mean? So that's maybe the first question I'll be asking, and I also apologize at this point for the fact that this will be a little bit of a philosophical even approach to why strategic planning, and I also warn you, I'm actually somebody who believes strongly in strategies and in strategic planning and in looking into the future a little bit when we make our plans. So if you have difficulties with that, then you know I'll be trying to sell to you still the idea of strategic planning, and then I'll come in on the topic on what does strategic mean in the internationalization setting. So what are the specific questions that we need to ask when we're talking about strategic planning or a strategic outlook on the future when we're talking about internationalization of vocational education and training and mobility, which is of course the topic also of today's seminar more specifically. And then I'll say something about what kind of outlook on strategy we think, and also from our experience, is perhaps the most useful in the setting of a vet school, of a mobility scheme between perhaps a school and a company, and in the EU programs, because we think that looking at a strategy more as action and a process rather than as a paper or as a formal commitment is more useful in this context, because things change all the time and there are various situations and partnerships change over time, and it's better to look at the actions and the processes involved rather than what is written on paper, and so it needs to be a combination in a way of both. So those are the sort of questions I'll be looking into. But before we start that, I would like to share a poll with you, maybe, and if you could answer the questions of the poll. And I would like to ask you if you have had any previous experience with strategy planning. And I hope you can see the poll right now. And if you would be so kind as to answer the questions. There are quite a few of you who has answered already, but we need a few more clicks. And then I'll share the results with you. We have 8 votes in right now, but we have 15 participants, so maybe a few more votes. I'm not sure how many are from the national agency, but oh, maybe that's it. I'll show you the... okay, now it shows the results person by person. But anyways, the result... there. Now I closed the answers, and we can see that, I hope you can see the results. There are 6 of you who have very little experience and 2 who have quite a bit of experience, and nobody with a lot of experience from strategy work. Thank you for the voting, and we'll come back to the votes later. I have a few more votes, but that's good for me to know that you still don't have maybe a lot of experience of strategy. So maybe it is good that I'm asking the question of what strategy really is. And in a way, I would like to summarize maybe the basic idea of strategy work as like this. It's really about planning for the future with the best possible knowledge at hand. So, and if you don't plan for your future, everything can of course be fine. We all know that. Things can go quite okay. And you do what comes along, you apply for a little bit of money here, you send some students there, and then you do the same next year, maybe slightly with slightly new partners, but you keep on doing what you're doing. But the fact is that if we plan and if we actually make goals for the future, it is much more likely to ensure that the activities develop in the way you actually want over time. And this is the whole idea of strategy. Strategy is no more complex than this. So strategic planning is really about collecting the best information you have of the situation right now, the best information you have of the future, based on a lot of sources around you, and then making smart plans for advancing towards what you want the future to be like. So really just planning for the future of your organization. And now, of course, when we're speaking about internationalization and mobility, then the focus is on issues like building partnerships and applying for the right kind of money and making sure that there is the right kind of competencies or skills in your organization to carry out the activities you want to do. So, really in brief, this is what strategy and why we do strategy at all. And in a way, we can then say that strategy is about dealing with the future here and now. So there is this idea of the future out there, and we don't know exactly what it is, but we still choose to deal with it here and now. And in a way, we're dealing with alternative futures. So we have to take into account that things might develop in this way or things might develop in that way, but we have to sort of be prepared for both. And that's actually very important when we do strategy work, to think of possible different scenarios of how things might work out. You all know this from applying for mobility projects. Sometimes you get your mobility project approved and sometimes you don't. But you still have to plan also for the situation that you don't get it, even if you hope, of course, that you will get funding for your mobility project. Well, this is in a way what strategy is about, and why it is also so important when we look then into applying for accreditation or charter, which is really about long-term funding for mobility actions. So we could summarize it also like this, that strategic action or acting now so that the future will be what you want it to be. It's all about the willpower to think up that alternative reality. So in a way, have a dream or an idea of what you want the future to be, and then to have the foresight and also determination to actually make it come true, so that you take the right steps and the right decisions to make that planned future come true. So this is really briefly what strategy is about, and it's no more complex than this. Sometimes, of course, when people hear the word strategy or strategic planning of internationalization, it might sound very complex or very sort of, even mystical a bit, but this is really not what it's about. It's just about really taking the decisions now so that the future can be the way you would want it to be. And then, of course, this sounds easy, but it's not so easy, because you need to make the right decisions and you need to make the right strategic choices. And this is what it's all about, and that's what requires skill. But you are, of course, all of you experienced mobility promoters. You have a lot of projects already in your background, and you will be applying for a charter now, and so in a way, I mean, with your skills and your views on how mobility should be run, you have all the prerequisites to make these right decisions. It's just, of course, to collect them together and to sit down with your colleagues maybe and to think about what is really needed. And this sort of thinking is what we summarized in the Finnish guide that we published in 2010 in English, I think. No, in 2010 in Finnish, and then 2013 in English. And we call it Strength from International Cooperation. And it's available online at this address, and I think many of you have seen it already in your materials for the accreditation applications. And I'll be using some of the models from this guide. This guide is, of course, written for Finnish schools, and it's just been translated into English. We will actually be coming out with a true EU version of it within the next half a year, so then it will be more fitted to all the countries' situations. But you can still learn a lot from this guide, I think, and from the models that we use in there, and those I have here as well in my presentation. There's also been, as the background of this presentation, I've also used the Dutch National Agency's Quality and Impact Scan material, and they have quite good material that is perhaps a bit more involved. You need to take a bit more time to get used to it and use it in your organization, but it will also produce quite a lot of information for you if you do these scans on quality and impact of your international activities that are in the Dutch model. But just for your information, that these are at the background. And the model from the Finnish guide that we've drawn up looks like this. It looks like any other strategy model. So for the ones of you who already had some strategic experience from before, you've seen that in most strategies you leave from the mission of an organization, or the core skills that the organization has and the values that the organization has. And then you draw up a vision of the future. I'll go into these in more detail soon, so you don't have to worry, but I'll quickly mention them here. The vision for the future, what kind of vision you have for the future, and in a way one can also say that the vision impacts the mission, core skills and values as well, if you really want to renew your organization. So this is why the vision is mentioned here before the mission and core skills. So it depends on how big a vision do we have for the future of our organization. Will it change the values or the mission of our organization as well? And then you draw up strategic goals based on that. So what kind of goals are we aiming for in the next 3 to 5 years? It's a normal strategic period. It's hardly anyone plans for longer than 3 to 5 years, because the future is still that changing that it's very hard to say what will be happening in 10 years. And all of this, of course, happens within an operating environment. So there are certain parameters in your operating environment. There are certain rules and regulations that you have to take into account, and those affect what your strategy will be like. And then based on your strategic goals for the next 3 to 5 years, you draw up action plans. And that's the final stage of implementing a strategy. So not just writing a strategy, but actually making it happen. Normally an action plan is made for 1 year at a time, and it makes sure that the strategic goals are achieved sooner or later. I mean, some will be dealt with maybe the first year, some will be dealt with for all the years because they are bigger goals, and some will be dealt with in the coming years only. So that's what the action plans are about, that you divide up the work involved in the strategy into smaller actions that also then get a budget and somebody responsible for them, and how to follow them up. And that's what the action plan is all about. But it's very important not to jump into the action plan right away, but actually think about what you want for your organization in the future. And that's what the visioning is all about. And this is really what strategy is truly. It's to see that those possibilities of the future and try to draw them up on a paper. So let's go in detail then into these topics, just to a little bit more explain what the mission and the core skills and the values, for example, are about. One of the basic questions from the point of view of internationalization of your organization or EU cooperation is to ask, so how is it related to the main tasks or purpose of your organization? How is the internationalization or international cooperation linked to your mission as an organization? And that's really, it's an easy question to ask, but it's not necessarily an easy question to answer. It's obvious, of course, that the European programs support mobility, and hence it's a good opportunity. But if you really want to answer this question, you need to also look at things like the labor market in your country. You need to look at the future plans of your students and your teachers. What do they want from their future? And does international cooperation and globalization have a role in that? And what are the strategies of your ministry? What are the strategies of your organization, perhaps, if you have strategies, and so forth? So it's not an easy question to answer, even if it sounds like that at first. The other question is, of course, what kind of skills do we have? What kind of competencies do we have in our organization to carry out internationalization work? And this is just as important to know what internationalization means for us. So do the teachers, do the staff, do the management have the necessary skills, or do we need to develop them? That impacts our strategy quite a lot, because if we already have the skills, we can move on to the next level. But if we need to build up the skills, then we need to focus first on that, and that will maybe take up quite a lot of our efforts in the first years. It has to do with language skills, but it also has to do with project skills. It has to do with mobility skills, the skills of running mobility schemes, and so forth. It has to do with the skills to build partnerships and keep up partnerships. And then finally, the values of the organization. This is often something that is skipped over quite quickly, but is actually an important part of strategy work, because the values, be they slightly hidden or more spelled out, more clear to the organization, they still affect how we function. And of course, when we speak of international contacts and globalization, the values play a specifically big role, because if we are not open to the world around us, for example, and we don't share our efforts and our achievements with others, then it's quite hard to do international cooperation. But on the other hand, if we have those values in place and if they're also spelled out, it's a lot easier. So you need to take that into account as well. And those are really the basic elements of any strategy. And so this is information you can find in any strategy guide. The same as for vision. So this is really what we want to see our VET organization as in the next 5 years, for example. You can look, of course, a little bit further into the future. You can have a vision that goes even into perhaps 2030 or even longer, but still it's smart to not draw up a strategy for a very long period, because it is, as I said, an uncertain future in any case. So it's better to look maybe for the next 3 or 5 years in practice. Normally, the sort of things one asks for in the vision is, how can we be more qualitative in our work? How can we be more attractive to the students? Or how can we be more interesting or useful for the labor market? How can we be more international? But then you really also need to ask, what does that really mean for us to be international? So it's not just about contacts, of course, or sending out the students. There needs to be also a link to your basic functions or the mission as an organization. So you need to go beyond that basic question of just being more international and ask, why do we want to be international? Why are we doing this work? What are we really getting out of it? And that's what the vision is all about. So and often one defines that one has a good feeling for the vision if it's feels like every member of the organization can sort of remember it automatically, and it doesn't anymore raise any why questions in a way, but it really answers all those why questions to everyone in the organization, and it gives a purpose to what you're doing. The operating environment, as I said already, it's the environment around you, so it's things like the funding or the ministries, rules and regulations, or the qualification frameworks you work in, and what does it look like right now, and are there any big changes to be expected in it? And these are important questions, because of course those changes might affect also your vision or your view of the future. What are the future professions in your area or in your sectors? What are the skills demands in the future? And what are the national or EU strategies asking from you in either your sector or your area of work? So these are the sort of questions one often looks at in the operating environment. And of course, information about the operating environment comes from outside of yourself. So you need to look into reports or research that has been done or strategies that exist already. And those can help you in giving a picture of the operating environment. And then, the strategic goals. This is perhaps the most difficult part, of course, of the strategy. It's also where you have to make choices. So, you need to perhaps look at the central areas of operation in your organization, and then which need international development the most. Is it, first of all, staff mobility that needs to be developed so that the staff can raise their skill levels in international issues, or is it student mobility, or do they need to go hand in hand? Do you need to develop more partnerships, or do you need to get rid of some of the partners because you just have too many? This is often something that most organizations struggle with, that they have perhaps only a few really qualitative good partners, and then they have too big partnerships that are maybe a burden to them in a way. So many organizations choose also to focus on some of their central partners. Do you need to make stronger links to those and so forth? And then building on this, you can build your strategic goals. They can be linked, of course, to developing the qualifications you're working on. They can be linked to developing the materials, the skills of the students, the skills of the staff, or they can be linked to labor market needs, or any other issues that are central to you and the work you're doing. But here it's of course very important to look at your own organization and what it's like and what it needs. So there are no common strategic goals that can be said to be everyone's, but rather they need to come from your own setting and from the analysis you've done in the previous steps with the mission of your organization, the values, and the operating environment. And then based on that, as I said, you draw up an action plan. And this is the one that is perhaps, to people that have done projects before, this is the easiest part in a way. If you have project experience, it's quite easy to say which steps need to be done next and how much time they take and who needs to be involved. And then that's what an action plan is all about. It's like a mini project for the next year. So you try to answer questions: how do we finance this? Where do we get the personnel from to do it? Which contacts and partners do we need? And what sort of a know-how and competencies do we need to carry it out? So it's already a much more practical step, and this you renew every year. Normally an action plan you renew every year. And this is the model that we're presenting in the guide. Of course, now there's different versions of this, so this is not a must to carry it out exactly like this, but going through these steps helps a lot. So then you get a good way already towards a strategy, but there can be changes and you can modify these. This is not a strict format that you have to exactly carry out in this way. So actually now I was gonna ask another question, if I can find it here in my polls. Wonder if I have it here. I think it's this one. So if you would answer the questions, the question I'm asking is: how many persons are involved in your international activities in your school? Is it one person, or is it 2 to 4 persons, or is it 5 to 10 even, or even over 10 people that are involved? And now we're getting some answers. This is interesting. Okay, there's quite a lot of you that even have 5 to 10 people, so you have or 2 to 4. So, but nobody seems to so far be all on their own with the international activities. So this is quite a good situation, because of course, when you're doing strategic planning, one of the key issues is really to work with your colleagues as well and draw up the strategies together, so that they're not just written by one person and then told to the others, but you need to agree on these things together with everybody working on the topic. Okay, I don't think we're getting in any more votes now. We seem to have 6 votes this time, so there's some of you that don't feel like answering here, but I still get a good view that at least all of you have somebody to work with that have answered the vote, and this is a very good situation, because and if you don't have this situation that you are quite alone, it would be really good to try to get a colleague involved, or a teacher from another department, or a few teachers maybe, so you can really build up a little bit of an international team that can together work on these issues and together decide on what next steps you need to take for your international activities. I'm going to end the poll here and then hide the results. Yeah, now the poll is, and then hide the results and go on. But thank you for that. It gives me an idea of how you're working in your organizations. I have to say from the Finnish experience at least that as soon as we started building teams of international coordinators or teachers working on international topics in the Finnish schools, that's when the sort of strategic outlook and the planning of international activities took the next step. So it was very important in Finland for developing the international activities. So this is one of the key issues, I would say, to making good strategies for the future, that you can really work together with perhaps some of the management, some teachers, and whoever is involved in the international activities. So when you then make these when you make these analysis of your strategic needs, there's a number of different topics that come in, and I've mentioned some of these here already, and often I like to speak of the strategy context, because the institutional strategy that has internationalism built into it, or the institutional strategy with an international component, as I've written here, is drawn up. It's not done so in vacuum from everything else. There are the European strategies in the background. There are the national strategies in the background. You have things like the local needs of business, but also maybe of the towns and the municipalities or the area. And you have the world of work. You might be a school with a focus on a few sectors only, and then of course those sectors' needs are quite important, so you need to take those into account. And different sectors have different internationalization needs. It's very different to talk about the skills needed in international work environment in the hotel industry or service sector from the technical sector, where or a car manufacturer or anything like that. So they both have international or global skills needs, but they are very, very different. One is maybe more focused on language skills, the other on the technical skills and understanding technical issues from different cultures. And there are also the global issues and developments to take into account, because of course the world around us is changing, as we all know, and there are issues that also affect vocational education and training from the outside and from the global level, and it's good to take a look at that as well. And all of this, that strategy context, affects your E+ mobility projects and your accreditation and charter application. And not to forget, you shouldn't either focus only, of course, on the charter applications or mobility projects, but you also have a possibility to go into strategic partnerships in the Erasmus Plus program. There are the sector skills alliances, and all of this can also have effect on how you plan to carry out your mobility charter in the future. So you can use the strategic partnerships to develop new contacts or to develop new materials for also mobility activities. And all of this can be built into your future plans. And so you should have a bit of a broader look than just the mobility point of view. And so that's something that is at the background when you do your analysis for your strategy work. So let me now share with you some of the topics that we see and have seen over the years, because we've done quite a lot of work actually on internationalization strategies. I told you already that in 2005 and 2006 we had our first trainings here in Finland, but then together actually with Hungary and the Netherlands we have already arranged now 3 different international trainings as well. And based on the material that we've seen there from a lot of different organizations, we have about maybe 80 Finnish organizations that have participated in our trainings, and then now closer to 40 organizations from all over Europe. It's quite clear that most common topics in internationalization strategies is student mobility and then Erasmus Plus, or similar development or cooperation projects. Nearly all strategies mention these two aspects, and they set up some goals for the student mobility, and they set up some goals for the cooperation projects. But not to limit yourself, I would also like to highlight some of the things that are less well represented. For example, very interesting topic, I think, from the point of view of a VET charter, is the incoming student mobility. So, of course, mostly now, when you send your students out to other countries, you also agree to receive students from those other countries. And this you can use as a part of your institution's internationalization. It has to do with the staff, the teachers, and their skills. It has to also do with how you involve the students, maybe, in the incoming student mobility. And do you open up a possibility for your whole institution to become a little bit more international by contacts with these students that come from other countries. Something that's often forgotten as well is the staff mobility. It's actually a very important part both of qualitative student mobility, but also of internationalizing your institution and building the sort of skills into your institution that will help in the future to run projects. So, taking a strategic look on staff mobility, what are we going to use staff mobility for? Are we going to apply for how much of it yearly, and where are we going to which countries are we going to send our staff, and so forth? These are important issues. There is the incoming staff mobility. Could we have visiting teachers, trainers, or lecturers even that come in to our institutions, and in that way we get more students in contact with content from other countries or listening to English. There is the quality issues of mobility, not just the numbers, but actually or the quantity, but just what is the quality of mobility? How is it prepared? How is it agreed on? And how is it assessed? And so forth. The whole topic of EasyVet or ECVET, I'm sure you've discussed in Croatia as well, and that's an important topic. It has to do with the quality of mobility also, but it also has to do with, of course, credit transfer and accreditation of the periods. There is the equality of mobility. Who do we send on mobility periods? How are the students chosen? Do we treat them equally? And that can be an important strategic goal to allow, for example, all the sectors to have mobility experiences, so that it's not just certain sectors that have this opportunity. In Finland, a popular topic right now is actually internationalization at home. So if we cannot send all the students on mobility periods, which is impossible, how do we link the curricula and the teaching that we do at home and the training that we do in the companies to international topics? So what can that look like when we do internationalization at home, and how do we build it into our activities? Intercultural skills development, international pathways or language learning, and so forth, these are also issues that often come up. So, but these are less well represented in strategies, but strategies can also take this into account. And topics that are generally missing almost altogether, but they are picked from singular strategies here and there, these topics, so they are real topics, but not something that we see very often, is things like what kind of partnerships do we need to develop in the future? Which sort of networks do we need to build? Do we need to be members in certain international associations in the future, and how do we set that up? Do we go for some international certificates or quality labels? So in some sectors these are very important, for example in the hotel and restaurant sector. Do we participate in international skills competitions like the Euro Skills or the World Skills? And immigrant and refugee issues can come into the strategies, or even education export, so selling our own education to other countries. So these are topics that have come in singular strategies here and there and been mentioned sometimes, but are quite rare in fact. But I'm just mentioning them here to you so you have some ideas of what sort of issues come up. And I have not formulated them as strategic goals or anything like that here, so they're just as topics. Of course, there's in strategies normally there's a goal related to them, then, so you have some plan for the future, but those I have not taken into account here. actually, right now, I would like to do another poll still and ask you if you already have a strategy in your institution. If I can find it. Yep. So I wonder if you can participate in the vote here and see if you have an institutional strategy, because this actually affects the work quite a bit. Okay, so some of you clearly have an institutional strategy. About 1/3 of you has clearly an institutional strategy. Half of you have it to some degree, so you have some sort of strategy, but it's maybe not very clear, or it's not very helpful in this sense. And then a small part of you, or one actually organization, says no, also that you have no institutional strategy to go back on. Well, if you have some institutional strategy, it's very important, of course, to take that into account. So in a way, you need to ask yourself, what does this strategy mean from the point of view of internationalization? How can we read internationalization into it? Or where would we use internationalization to make this strategy come true? And this is one of the key issues when you work with an existing strategy in the background. And if that strategy is not very clear, which I understood that it is in some cases, maybe it's very general, or it cannot be very helpful, then you still need to make sure that the plans you make for internationalization are in line with what you have. And if you, of course, have no institutional strategy, then you can leave from a clean slate, but you still need to check with whoever makes or takes decision in your organization that it is in line. So this is, of course, very important always. But if you have a strategy already, then you need to look into that, and you need to analyze it with your colleagues and sit down and say, how are we going to use this strategy, and what of it are we going to do in an international way? So that's kind of the basic question you need to ask. And when you start doing that work, these are the sort of steps to go through. So now here we have the strategy model again from the guide, but we have opened it up with some of the topics that are related to these different steps. So if we start in the green area, on the point of vision, it says meta strategies, and that refers to things like EU strategies, national strategies, or strategies in certain sectors or regions that are existing already and that you need to take into account. It can also be related to an analysis of your institution's general strategic aims. So what I was just referring to, that you have a strategy already and you need to analyze it from an international perspective. So those are things you need to take into account, and they sort of relate a little bit to the operating environment, the society, and the working life around you, but they also relate to your own institution. And based on that, often you end up drawing up different scenarios. So we can go this way, or we can go that way, or we can go the third way. And there's a few different ways sort of you can go forward. And that's where the decisions come in. You need to start making decisions of what's your chosen future, really. That's often related to what kind of partners you have, what kind of workplaces you're working with, what is the skills and of your teachers, staff and management, and what are your students' needs. And then you choose a path for the future, and that is the visionary goals and objectives, or the strategic goals, as they're sometimes called as well. These are different words for the same thing. So you set up some improvement goals, strategic goals for maybe quantity of mobility activities, quality of mobility activities, and other international goals. And then, as I said, you draw up the action plan on that. And in this, and what is important in this picture too, is that there is the big square that says daily work. And here we come now to this idea of strategy as action. Because of course, one thing is writing all of this down and making these decisions, but it only becomes true when you actually plan it into your daily work, so that it becomes a part of how your institution works, and so that you actually make changes in how you carry out your activities. And that's when the strategy comes alive in a way, and you actually carry it out. All of us know, I think all of you have experience as well, just like me, of strategies that have been more or less made on paper and stayed on paper, as they say sometimes in strategy literature. So they're written down, maybe read by some people at least, and then never returned to again. And this is really, of course, as we all know, quite pointless activities. So strategies should be made so that they affect the daily work, and so that they actually affect how we do our work. So that's the sort of idea behind the strategy as action. It means really that it comes into your daily work. Okay, but this is of course not easy. It's a tough list of many topics, and I've gone quite quickly through them, and I'm sure you wonder about some of them, what they mean really for you, and are they, can that actually work for us, and so forth. And I agree. I mean, drawing up full-fledged strategies is not an easy thing to do. There's at least a few different scenarios of which you mentioned already, that some of you don't have an institutional strategy or a framework for strategy work already. So then you have to just make plans and make strategic choices for your international activities. And without that support of the whole institution, it can make it a little bit easier sometimes, but it's also a little bit more, how should I say, it's a bit more lonely work. You're out on your own. The other strategy or scenario is, of course, that you have some strategy, but you don't have much internationalization. I don't think this is the case with you, because you're all applying for charters now, so you have already international activities. But quite common is that you have internationalization that is not integrated into your activities. It's quite separate. It's a little bit to the side of all the normal activities. Mobility is something extra that you do on top of everything else. And then you have the challenge ahead of you of bringing this together, so that the management of your institution, and so that everyone sees that what you're doing in internationalization also develops the institution as a whole. So it's a part of making the future of your VET institution. You can also have a national or regional strategy framework even that is in place, and then you need to, of course, fall into that, and that puts limits on how you can work, but it again gives you direction as well, so you can lean on what exists already. And often it's a combination of the above. And so the situations are much more complex than we like to make in guides and in models like the ones I've been presenting. And this is important to remember. And the point is not here to make the perfect strategy. It's about starting the work and to make it real, so that you actually change really some things in your daily work around internationalization. And this is really maybe the most important question of all. And that's why in our guide we have also actually taken this a little bit into account, so that the guide actually takes into account two different scenarios. That you either can have a scenario where you have an institutional strategy which already says that internationalization is important, we are going to do mobility, we are going to do cooperation projects, and it explains why we're doing them and how they link to the developments of the organization. And then you can build on that and make an action plan for international cooperation based on it. Or we also have a model where the complete strategy doesn't so well take into account internationalization, but then you draw up a separate international cooperation strategy, and then based on that, an action plan. And both are just fine. They're similarly good models, they're just a little bit different on how they approach the topic. And so it can be split up in different ways. And like I said, every strategy doesn't have to take into account every exact detail in the guide. For example, the guide is a guide. You can use it or not use it the way you feel like. But some of those topics definitely need to be taken into account, and of course its strategic goals need to be very clear, and the vision for the future. What are you planning to develop your institution towards as far as internationalization goes? So before we go to the last part, I would still like to mention a few things about strategy, because many people get very scared when they hear the word strategy. And it has to do with things like this. It has to do with that it's often mystified. But that's what I said in the beginning. It's really nothing mystical. Strategy is just about making wise choices now about the future that you want. And often also it's seen as something linked to technology or digitalization, that you need to take that into account. You can and you should maybe take it into account, but it's not the main point of strategy. Strategy is really about making smart plans. Sometimes strategy can also be seen as a punishment, because it of course makes choices. So what strategy is a lot about is to make choices. So you say that staff mobility is more important for the next 2 years than student mobility because our staff is not international enough. This is an example of a normal, quite usual strategic decision. And then it seems as a punishment to the people who has been doing student mobility. And this is, I mean, understandable, but it has to do with how strategy is communicated. And if it's decided together that we now, for the next 2 years, focus on staff mobility instead of student mobility, then it doesn't feel as punishment. So it's really a lot about this, that are you informed about the strategy, or are you a part of making the strategy? And this is why it's so important to take everybody into account and build the strategy together. And it's important not to make strategy as a report of activities. It really should be much more about looking into the future than that. So there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of brighter sides to strategy too, because it's really about analyzing your own activities and understanding them. It's about involving people. It's about creating meaning for your work. Answering that question, which we all really want to know: why are we doing this work? What's the point of doing all of this? And that you can do through telling compelling stories about the development of the work and the future of the work. And then it's about making the concrete actions in the daily work and putting the strategy into practice, so that everybody gets a chance also to affect what the future looks like. So this is really what strategy is all about. This is why I believe in strategy so strongly. So when strategy is done in the right way and planned in the right way, and everybody is involved in doing it, then it can really be a force for the organization to push ahead and to become more interesting, both in students and in employers and businesses point of view. The process is very close to a creative process, the process of writing a book or the process of painting a painting. And quite often that process can be described like this. I hope that some of you at least recognize this, because often the creative process starts out by thinking that, oh, this is great, this is wonderful, I have this beautiful idea, I'm going to do it like this. Then you realize that it's not as easy as that. Then you start feeling very bad about it yourself and also about the idea, but then you get over that, and slowly you come to a state where you feel okay and you feel great again. And this is quite normal for when you create something new. And the strategy process is exactly like this too. So I hope nobody is expecting it to be super easy, but it's still rewarding, and it should be, something that creates new meaning in your workplace. So you should be doing it in a way like that too, not just as something that you have to write for the charter application, because really that's not the only point of the strategy. You do need it in your charter application, yes, but you should also be using it as an opportunity to plan the future for your organization. And expect it to be a little bit hard. It's not every step on the way is not going to be easy, and it's not obvious. Strategy work is never obvious. It's about being creative, and it's about being smart about your choices and your moves. And that's what we're trying to do with our model, is to make it simple to see the important topics that you need to take into account. But this is not an answer in itself. It just helps you to see what the issues are that you need to look into. So I've started to use up my time slowly, and we're coming towards the end, but at the very end here, I would maybe still like to share with you a study that we did in Finland, which we have also translated a short version of, or an abbreviated version of it, into English. It's called the International Dimension in the Strategies and Daily Life of Vocational Schools, and in Finland. So the vocational schools, the vocational institutions in Finland were surveyed by our previous organization. We have merged from the beginning of the year, but SIMO was our organization last year still, and so we did this research, and there's a few interesting topics in here which you can find this online, so you can go and look it up online at this address at the bottom. My colleagues from the Croatian agency will share these slides with you, I'm sure, and so you can get the link from there. But in there's a few maybe observations that can be that kind of supports what I've been saying now. One is that the strategy process that you build up is very, very important. It's important to involve a lot of people, to do it together, to create the strategy together. So it's not just written by management, or it's not just written by one teacher in charge of international affairs, but really that you have more people involved than that. However, most important is that the management is also involved, not just the people responsible for international affairs, or the international team, if you have such a team, which many of you had. You need to also cooperate somewhat with the world of work. It's difficult, it's not easy to get them involved, but on some level you need to have information from there as well, because that's really where the forefront of internationalization also in a way takes place. And it's of course your students who will be working in those workplaces, so knowing something about the international skills needs is important. You need to have a link to the curricula and the pedagogics or the qualifications that you work on. So you need to have that sort of deeper implementation as well, not just putting mobility on top of everything else that you do already, but link it to the skills needs on that level as well. And it's important to take into account the practical implementation, so not just writing the plans, but also really on how you involve the whole staff to carry it out. And again, a warning, it is not easy to manage change, because if you remember what I said in the beginning, strategy is all about managing change in a way. It's about planning change for your institution, so growth of mobility activities or increased international skills. But it can be very complex. And here is a nice little graph on how it can be complex. For example, if you don't have the right vision and you carry out change, even if you have all the right skills and you have the incentives in place and the resources and you have an action plan, but the vision is lacking. Nobody really knows why we're doing this and where we're heading with it. It can be causing confusion. On the other hand, if you don't have the skills, but you have all the rest and you even have a vision, then it can cause anxiety. Or if you have vision, skills, resources and an action plan, but you don't have incentives, so you don't have any reasons among the staff why they should be doing this, then it can cause a lot of resistance again. And if you don't have the resources to do the work, everybody gets frustrated. And if you don't have a real action plan, you get a lot of false starts. So you get people doing all kinds of things, but they're not really coordinated and they never really lead to the actual results. So in a way, this graph here summarizes very nicely why you need all the different bits and pieces. It's slightly different words that I used here than I used in my model, but they're really about the same issues in any case. And it summarizes nicely in a way that really all the bits and pieces are actually kind of important if you actually want to carry out managed and sort of controlled change in your organization. So I'm going to finish with a quote. I said my presentation was going to be also slightly philosophical, and I hope it has been that to some degree. And I like this quote actually in a way because it pinpoints that strategy is not just about planning action or planning projects, but it's also really about being flexible. It's about finding realistic responses to changing situations, and so, but still so that you're also ready to change when the world around you changes. And so strategies should never be locked in. I mean, in a final way. It should be the best possible plan for the future at any particular moment, and we should be ready to change them as well, and to be able to realistically respond to the changing situations around us. And I like this very much. It's not maybe so easy, but in a way it summarizes a little bit of what I believe good strategy is all about. Good strategy, which is not just a paper version, but something that people also, that can give meaning to people's work and a vision to sort of aim for, and that's what I hope your strategies will be like too. So now I would be ready to take questions and comments. There is nobody who has commented anything in the chat so far, but if you have any thoughts or ideas, I would be glad to receive them. We have also used up our time already, so we don't need to go on for a very long time. But I would be glad to have some questions if anybody wants to, or just a comment, even if somebody has a comment that you want to share with the rest. I think Lydia was promising I would be funny and in this presentation, but I'm not sure I've been able to achieve that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Vladimir. You thought that it was useful, and that's nice to hear. I hope it has given you some new ideas. I'm sure they're not all something that you can take into use maybe right away, but it gives you a framework. And I think also the presentations you hear tomorrow from the Hungarian colleagues, which I've actually worked with before, they will be a good presentation, I think, on how you can, as an example of how you can draw up a strategy. So that will also be giving you probably some ideas on how to do your own.
Thank you, Mika. And I would like to encourage all the others, if you have any other ideas, comments, maybe not questions, but if a question arises, also feel free to ask now, because it's an ideal chance to get the answer right away. Of course, we cannot write the strategy for you, and as you probably have seen, it's a how-to and why, but the real work has to be done by you. But if you have any other questions on how to, or something remained unclear. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Šoštarić.
Okay, so Vladimir is asking how do you change the strategy? How often should it be done, or is it the same for a longer period of time? Yeah, this is a really good question, and there are different schools, I have to say, about this. So some schools of strategy thinking, maybe slightly older schools, were talking often about 5 to 10 year strategies even. But personally, I think today quite often it is more common to work on 3 to 5 year strategy periods. And you are now applying for a charter for vet mobility. It's now 2017. The first time you will be applying for funding for is in 2018 if you get your charter, and then you can apply for 2018, 19 and 20 funding. So that's 3 years ahead. However, of course, it's always for 2 years of funding, so you will be going into 21 and 22 even. So probably looking at a 5-year strategy in your case would be realistic, and that would be the sort of thing that is possible to do. But because even after that, the European programs will change again. So you have to remember that too, which is probably your most important strategic meta strategy or framework that you work within. So we don't know what the new programs from 2021 onwards will look like. So that's probably something you need to also take into account. But it's two things really. Not to plan, maybe the modern way to do it is not to plan the strategy for too long a time. So maybe 5 years is a good time. And then two, if the world around you changes, you should be ready to change your strategy as well. You never know what will happen. There can be major changes to funding of vet schools in your country, or there can be major changes to the program. There can be some new opportunities coming up in the coming years, and then you should be ready to change your strategy as well. So in a way, be flexible as well in your strategic thinking. So, and sensitive to what is happening around you, and not too locked in, because otherwise you might actually miss out on great opportunities as well. So I'm not sure what Lydia is thinking, but if there are no more questions, maybe
I agree. If there are
done.
no other questions or comments, I would like to thank you, Mika, for your great presentation. I would like to thank all the other participants for joining us today. And I would also like to remind you that we will have our second day of our webinar tomorrow. It starts also at 11. So we're looking forward to have you again with us. We will be in another Adobe webinar room. Ours. This one was from the Finnish National Agency, and all the information regarding the webinar for tomorrow you can find on our website. You can find it probably in your email, because we send out some invitations also. So as Mr. Saarinen already mentioned, we will have Croatian expert tomorrow, that is Mrs. Adriana Paric, that will help you even further to realize how to really write your strategy of internationalization for your institution. And we'll have an example of our Hungarian colleagues that are from vocational school, Miss Szilágyi and Solosi, that will give us example how did they do it in their institution. So I once again, I'm looking forward to see you in the chat room or on our webinar tomorrow too. So if there's anything else, no?
Okay.
Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thank you a lot from my... You too, and good luck to everyone who's applying for a vet charter.
That's my wish. So. I wish also to all of them. Thank you. I believe that now they have a clearer vision to write.
Thank you. I hope so. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.